Raymond as a joke, you know, being the last sort of thing I'd be expected to do. And it somehow stuck in my mind that it might be rather good to try and do that. And it goes with all the other kind of things I do, where you have a fantasy situation, Father Christmas or Fungus Bogeyman, and you imagine them to be wholly real and then follow it through logically from there. And same with this thing, you have this fantasy, all too real fantasy, that they imagine that's real. What's going to happen when the average man in the street hears that there's going to be a nuclear attack in 3 days' time? What does he do? And then follow it through logically from that. He dies, of course. You get very emotionally involved doing it. I mean, I used to lie awake at night and scribble down bits of dialogue that they might say. You know when you've got a good idea, if it keeps you awake and makes you work at every odd moment, because it sort of takes over your life in a way, which is a good sign that you're on to something that's hopefully going to be good. I remember that weekend when the Cuban Missile Crisis was on, feeling actual physical fear, because the boats were, the ships with the missiles were going across the Atlantic, and Kennedy said if they don't turn round, that's it. God, and we just thought this was a Friday or Saturday, I think. I thought, God, by Monday we may not be here anymore. Luckily they did turn round, and we all breathed a sigh of relief, and it was touch and go. You've only got to pick up the phone. It's the end of the civilized world, you know. Europe wiped out, chunks of America wiped out. It's just unbelievable. I'd done a book before with these funny old couple in, Gentleman Jim, I think. Yes, that's it. He has dreams of being a highwayman. And they're a bit like my mum and dad anyway, only exaggeratedly simple. And they had to be simple in this story to obey the government instructions. I wanted them to do exactly what the government said. And to do that, you'd have to be fairly dim. You had to make them that way in order for them to follow these lunatic instructions, you know, Spike Milligan kind of instruction. Got that idea of what will two ordinary simple people do when they hear this appalling news, which you really can't take in. You know, if we're told now, 3 days, this is all going to be blown to bits. You just walk around stunned, really. But if you're a little bit simple, you might think, oh yes, we'd better paint the windows white to keep the radiation out. They are innocent as well as dim, and they don't fully live in the adult world. I mean, they're law-abiding, quiet, obedient people like the working class was of years ago, doing as they're told, knowing their place, and it's the government. So it's a combination of innocence and ignorance, really. It's based on roughly here. I wanted them isolated because I didn't want the bother. Otherwise, you've got a whole cast of characters to draw, which gets tedious and too much hard work, really. Keep them few. I did a book about my parents called Ethel and Ernest, and that was the most one that means most to me, because obviously it's my mum and dad, who I was very close to, and it has to deal with their illness and death, which was difficult to do. So that's the one that's most emotionally involving. Drawing my mum on this hospital trolley was a bit ghastly. We went into the hospital at 3 in the morning, and she was laid out on this plastic trolley thing, dustbin bags in the background, and Kleenex and Vim right by her face. It was all a bit awful, so that was the worst thing to have to deal with. Worse than Jim and Hilda, really, because they're fictional characters. I mean, the one I like best is my mum and dad one, of course, Ethel and Ernest. And Father Christmas in a funny way, because that's a bit like my dad again. Seemed to be obsessed with my parents, got 500 photographs of them up on the wall and drawings and things. Very unhealthy. Yes, he's a bit like my dad, grumping all the time and going out delivering, which is what Dad did as a milkman. I like the fact that they're a remembrance of them. I do look at it quite often. It's the only one of my books I ever do look at, because it's like a family picture book in a way, reliving the lives they had and reliving the house I lived in for 23 years. That's very good. I don't look at the death bits at the end, of course. That's a bit upsetting. I came here in '67, soon be 40 years. That's funny, in my book, Ethel and Ernest, I put in there at the end, Mum and Dad lived here for 41 years, which seemed incredible at the time. Now I've been in this place nearly 40 years. It seems like the bat of an eyelid, really. This was done while I was filling in time, I think. I waited to hear what they said about Ethel and Ernest when I'd drawn it out in pencil, and they were ages looking at it. So I filled in the time doing this sort of knitting, just doing my parents again, just to pass the time, really. And I never finished it. It's so crude and unfinished and bad in all sorts of ways. But I've ceased to see it now. I might paint it over soon, because it's rather ghastly. It's a bit like those people at the Bloomsbury lot, you know, decorated cupboard doors atrociously. Yes, that's what it is, really. Yet another parental thing. I think I've only moved about 3 times in my whole life, and would hate to move again, because having done it, it takes you about a year to settle down again, I think. I couldn't face all that, particularly this time of life when you're about to pop off anyway. Not worth moving when you're 71. Ethel and Ernest was based on, well, about my parents' home. That's all done from memory of what it was like in the 30s and 40s and 50s and so on. That's the most close one, I think, and just built in the back garden here and flies over the downs to Brighton, which is only about 8 miles away. I don't know where the idea of the snowman flying came from. It's been pointed out to me since that there's a flying snowman in Rupert, which I've since seen. I hadn't seen at the time. Wouldn't mind admitting it if I'd pinched the idea from there. I didn't pinch it from there. There's always a lot of flying in children's books and things, I think. Nesbitt's magic carpet thing, and it's a common human dream fantasy, isn't it, flying? I didn't like books much as a child, actually. I always felt disappointed when I got hold of a Christmas present and felt that telltale concave edge down one side and thought, oh, bloody hell, a book. But I did like Rupert, actually. Somebody gave me a copy of Rupert, annual, which I still got. And that is fantastic. And I like the early Rupert, Mary Tourtelle, before Bestall got hold of it. Bestall's very good, but Mary Tourtelle's better. And she's a wonderful animal drawer. And I like her things because they're peaceful and quiet and very gentle and filmed all in long shot. Never has bleeds. Well, once the blue moon. There are always little figures in a panel, like figures on a theatre, which gives it a great deal of peace and quiet and calm and homeliness. Illustrating somebody else's stuff is easier in a way, because it's slightly tedious when you've created the thing yourself, you've lived through it with the writing, when you've sort of got it all out and you've done it, you think, that's it, bam, finished. And then you've got to start illustrating the bloody thing. A great honour to be asked to do this fantastic book, collected poems of children for Ted Hughes. I'm working on this jacket now, which was terrific stuff to do. I do the thing in pencil, black and white pencil, photocopy that onto watercolour paper, and you can print it in a colour, which is quite interesting. Yes, you do a black and white drawing, but you print it in blue, say, if it fits the theme, and then you can either slosh the watercolour on, or start working with crayon straight away. Occasionally I do things entirely in crayon. Snowman's done entirely in crayon, which was a nightmare for the poor animators, because they had to do all these tens of thousands of cells with, instead of sloshing a paint on and painting in it solidly fairly quickly, had to get crayons and build up this texture, which they must have been cursing, but they did it brilliantly. With illustrating, there is a lot of donkey work that Stanley Spencer called knitting. You know, you've drawn the thing, you've had the idea, you've drawn it out in line, you've worked out the tone, and you spend all day painting the pattern on a dress. You know, just drawing it in, and then you paint leaves, or, you know, it takes ages. You've got to become an actor then, and be inside the character. What does it feel like to be doing this? What does it feel like to be lifting something? What does it feel like to be running through the rain? And you've got to get the feeling of that into the figure, and also be detachedly looking at the figure from the outside. You've got to be in 2 places at once. in the figure doing it and an observer outside looking at it. Whereas writing, it's creative from beginning to end. And when the wind blows needed a lot of research, I had about 2 shelves that wide of books about nuclear war and the effects of it, medical effects and so on. I'm delighted by the fact they've gone on so long, of course, and I'm often at signing sessions and a middle-aged couple will come up, people about 40 or so, and say, oh, we loved your books, we had them when we were children, and now our children, they like them too. So it's quite fantastic that there's 2 generations of children have grown up with the same books. It's terrific.